We began with Jared Diamond's interpretation of why some countries are rich, why some countries are poor. We look to Eurasia as the continent where we believe we will find the rich countries, because they have that east-west orientation where technology will travel much more easily. We have early farming transporting itself across the continent. So we look to Eurasia as the place where we believe the countries will become rich. Now, we move forward to the Industrial Revolution. This is when we see the achievement of modern economic growth rates. This is when those rich countries really take off and achieve modern economic growth rates in GDP of 1.5% to 2% per year consistently. This is the moment when not are there going to be rich countries here, but rich countries start to become the rich countries of today. With the Industrial Revolution, we focus in Eurasia specifically on Great Britain. This was where the beginning of industrialization occurred. Some believe in North America as well, we'll talk about that, but Great Britain is where we see the Industrial Revolution begin. Again, on Eurasia. Why Great Britain? This was an area where there was a lot of openness, of trade, of ideas. People were relatively socially mobile. It was a region of political liberty, one of the centers of the scientific revolution, where we see the beginning of mathematics, the beginning of science as we know it today. They also have a location that is geographically blessed. In Britain, they have an island economy where there is sea-based trade. Any sea-based trade is going to be the least expensive of all the trade. It's also close to the European continent, where they can access trade with a lot of these countries. They have rivers that you can easily navigate, so goods move really easily within the country. It was good dirt for agriculture, good climate for agriculture, and it was close in proximity to North America. There was also, being an island economy, less risk of invasion. So they didn't have to worry as much about invaders, and therefore were able to focus their energies on economic growth. Many believe also the coal available in Britain that could power the Industrial Revolution was critical in why they were the focus of the Industrial Revolution. So when you look at these countries that are becoming rich, Great Britain was the beginning of it. We saw it in Great Britain. We saw, as these modern economic growth rates spread to other countries, very similar social changes occurring. These also occur today in other areas where we see economic development. Urbanization is one of the first changes of industrialization. People moving from outside of the city to inside cities, creating these urban centers where trade and specialization can occur. Also, changing gender roles. We have women participating in the workforce in a way that we don't typically before industrialization, as a result of falling birth rates, job opportunities in the market, delayed marriage, empowering of women overall. These major changes we see as there's an increase in specialization, which increases efficiency, and we see growth. So how did industrialization spread, right? So first, from Britain to her colonies, North America, Australia, New Zealand. They have a similar climate. The technology is transferred very easily. These were also colonies where locals were pushed out or killed. And so the British moved in with their set of laws. The way that they had industrialized their own country, these folks industrialized these colonies. Now within Europe, we saw a movement from northwestern Europe to southeastern Europe. It began in the Northwest, where the climate, the natural resources, the disease environment, political and social conditions were more favorable for industrialization, and then it moved southeast. It spread more quickly after the end of serfdom, when constitutional governance was introduced, railways facilitated the spread of technology, ideas, capital. Once these transportation infrastructures were established, then these ideas, these technologies moved southeast. After this movement was a spread to Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And again, those first two moments, there was not a lot of resistance, right? The locals had been pushed out or killed, spread of disease with the initial colonization. When industrialization initially spread, then organically it moved from the northwest down to the southeast of Europe. But when the spread of industrialization moved to Latin America, moved to Asia, moved to Africa, we had a lot more confrontation. This was a tumultuous move. It was the rich, powerful European powers exploiting poorer and less powerful regions. There was an increase in standard of living as a result of the industrial spread. However, it came at a very high cost. So when you're looking at economic development, we look at this last transition really as the beginning of where we're starting to talk about development today. When we want to hone in on this period of economic growth where the spread of industrialization happened with Latin America, Asia, Africa, it's important for us to rewind back to World War I and its consequences. We had a destabilization of the Russian Tsarist regime with World War I. It eventually led to a 20th century world split into three giant pieces. There was the First World, the Second World, and the Third World. This destabilization of the Russian Tsarist regime led to the eventual communist control of about a third of the world's population. Financial instability in Europe, debt, the destruction of the Ottoman and Habsburg empires, which led to these small successor states fighting with one another. There were allied claims for reparation payments from Germany that led to Hitler and World War II. So this 20th century world started with World War I, World War II, all of this confusion with who was going to be in power in the world in Europe. That gave us this second half of the 20th century where we had the First World, which was the capitalist world. This was Western Europe, it was the US, it was Japan. We then had the Second World. This was the world under central planning, the communist world. USSR, the Soviet Union, China, Cuba, North Korea, the Eastern European states that were under Soviet dominion. And then we had the Third World. This is where this term comes from, the Third World countries. These are the autarkic countries, those that isolated themselves. They were the post-colonial countries. They did not want anything to do with the capitalist First World or the communist Second World. They wanted to develop, but they wanted to develop on their own. The problem with these Third World countries and their development is that autarky didn't work. So today, what we are left with is a new global interaction, right? We have a new global interaction where we have those developing countries of the Second and Third World trying to catch up to the First World while maintaining their sovereignty. They don't want to be controlled by the First World. They don't want to be colonies of the First World. They want to keep their sovereignty while participating in global economic prosperity. They want to take part in trade. They want to take advantage of global capital. But all of this while remaining respected members of the global community. So really, this is where we are today. We moved from Jared Diamond saying that there are certain continents that are ripe for growth. Then the Industrial Revolution takes us to this moment where we have Britain beginning industrialization, spreading to her colonies, spreading to southeastern Europe, then getting pushed out into the rest of the world. We have World War I destabilizing the global economy and separating, after World War II, the globe into first world capitalism, second world communism, and third world independent. Please don't mess with us. We want to industrialize on our own countries. In the 1960s, we found ourselves wanting to help these folks from the third world, not always being very good at doing it, sometimes imposing, taking away sovereignty. Then we moved to the 1990s, where these second and third world countries want to take part in trade, want to take advantage of global capital, while still keeping their sovereignty. When we look now at this world, we want to be able to help these second and third world countries, and we focus on some key aspects that are important to achieve growth: savings, trade, technology, resources. Where growth has failed for many of these countries is with the poverty trap. They are too poor to save and invest. Physical geography. They have high transportation costs as a result of their terrain. They fall into a fiscal trap. The government cannot collect taxes. Maybe they're too poor, not well run. If they can't collect the taxes to build the infrastructure, then they burden themselves with debt to start building the infrastructure. Well, sometimes the debt burdens the government so that they can't spend the money that they need to spend. There are also governance failures, problems with rule of law, problems with corruption, cultural barriers. In many of these countries, certain groups are isolated. Women, certain ethnic groups are isolated. This is very destructive to economic development and can slow growth. Also, geopolitics, interference from the outside world, including trade barriers from rich countries. Sometimes they fall into the trap of lack of innovation. The market is too small to get off the ground. They can't start these ideas and get going. And finally, the demographic trap. There are just too many kids to support for these countries to get going in terms of getting their step on the ladder, the first step on the ladder of economic development.